This show is for the sales leader who knows they have a pivotal role in driving outstanding sales results. Getting hired or promoted to manage a sales team is a big accomplishment, but you know you have to work hard to become a great sales leader. You are listening to the Divine Comedy of Sales podcast. Here's your host, coach, and advisor to elite sales leaders from around the world, Matt McDarby.
Hello and welcome to the Divine Comedy of Sales podcast. I'm Matt McDarby, veteran seller, leader, coach, and advisor to elite sales leaders all over the world. I'm so excited to have you listening. In our latest season of interview episodes, I'm going to be asking some of the same questions about lessons learned, some of the great challenges that the leaders I'm interviewing have overcome. Who did they learn from? But there's one important question that I'm adding to the mix, and it's essentially, what are the most important parts of your system? And this is my way of bringing systems thinking, which has been a recurring theme of the last several episodes, into our conversations with highly effective and successful sales leaders. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that to help you clarify in your own mind, what are the key elements in your system? What does your sales leader's operating system look like? I'm really excited to have you listening in on these conversations. So I hope you love this season of interviews. Our very next guest is coming up right now. I met our next guest when he was working as VP of Sales at Refract, a conversation intelligence software company that he co-founded back in 2015. Since then, he's co-authored a book on prospecting. His company was acquired by Allego, where he served as VP of Sales for the EMEA region. And he recently rejoined some old friends of his and is now head of growth at My Sales Coach. Please welcome Richard Smith to the Divine Comedy of Sales. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. We've been connected for some time, and it's a pleasure to be on this show and talking about topics that I'm very passionate about. So yeah, looking forward to it.
I know you are. That's why I asked you to join. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, well, let's just dive in, because I think what people will learn, remember our audience is people that are in sales leadership roles today or aspire to be. And I think they'll be able to pick up a number of nuggets from you today based on our conversation. So I've talked over the last several months about systems thinking as it pertains to sales leadership. And what I mean is applying this, a key principle of systems thinking is looking at sort of the interconnectedness of things, understanding the relationships of all the various parts within a complex system. And the reason I've been talking about that is the best sales leaders that I've observed have a kind of a system or a way of making sense of all of those interconnected parts of a sales organization. And they diagnose and tune and move certain levers to affect results. Now, you've been a very successful sales leader for a long time, and you've worked with other very successful sales leaders over the last many years. So what would you say are the most important parts of your system, your approach?
Yeah, and there's maybe two elements I really want to focus on to answer that question, Matt. And the first one is probably the most crucial and key. And I think people listen to this, sales leaders listen to this, will be like, yeah, we hear this is important, we get it. But the reason I bring this up is that it's a lesson that I continue to learn to this day. A lesson that I've made a lot of mistakes with along the way. And it all comes from hiring, because actually when you think about everything else that makes or breaks a sales team and how it functions, how it operates, the culture you have in that sales team, everything stems from that critical piece of the jigsaw, bringing on board the right people. The reason I say I've made a lot of mistakes on this is because I have, because quite frankly, when I look about how I recruited and hired people earlier on in my leadership journey to what I do now, it is chalk and cheese. And you know, I probably, like many sales leaders listen to this, what hiring used to look like for me was quite lacking a process. Hey, do I get a good feeling for this person in a couple of interviews? Over time, it's became a lot more systematic. I've learned that you can't just have good feelings about people. It's not enough. And, you know, happy to kind of dive in, you know, some of the things I do now differently to make sure that we get the right people on the bus. But yeah, like as a starting point, hiring is just the piece of the jigsaw that I think you get that wrong, everything else crumbles down.
I'm with you. Yeah, I do want to dig into hiring in a moment, but I can, for those who can't see us on video,
which is pretty much everybody because this is an audio show. But, I'm kind of wincing a little bit because I think about places where for different reasons, we didn't get the hiring profile right, or we didn't or weren't allowed to approach it systematically. And we paid the price, tons of wasted time and effort. Tell me more, though. I want to come back to hiring, but what are the other kind of key elements of the system? And then we'll kind of dig into.
And the other thing, and probably unsurprising given where you came to know about me, and has just, as I've, progressed over my career over the last decade, really, in sales leadership, is that in order to fine tune the operation, you have to be spending a lot of time listening to how your salespeople sell.
Ugh.
And, I think about when we started Refract in 2015 with this concept of, giving sales leaders visibility into sales conversations for coaching purposes, which is a fundamental use case of that. Actually, when I think of all the other use cases that I use for capturing calls, comes down to helping reps with their deals, helping reps with their next steps, preparing them for next conversations, understanding what messaging is working right now. How does messaging need to be tweaked? How can I feed back to marketing? Hey, the way that you're asking us to position X to a prospect, I believe isn't effective, and here's the evidence to show that. There's, quite frankly, without me having access to how my salespeople sell, not their interpretation of how they sell or their version of what happened on a sales call or their belief about where a deal sits right now, I just don't think I could really, truly operate and fine tune the system, if you like. I'd be doing so much in the dark and based on gut instinct. And I think sometimes it makes sense to you to trust your gut, but in a world of leadership, trying to build successful teams, replicating what works, you can't just rely on gut instinct.
Yeah. Well, I think, so those two pieces resonate with me. They line up with my experience as a leader and as a coach of leaders, right? As someone who develops sales leadership teams. I want to come back to the hiring piece in a moment, but just tell me a little bit more. This idea, look, conversation intelligence software has been around for a little, right? And there's some pretty big and loud voices in that space. And I've seen a lot of companies, larger enterprises with a lot of resources, attempt to make good use of conversation intelligence. And for various reasons, not have great success. But one of the most common reasons has been managers, even with those tools in hand, still not willing to invest the time to listen, observe, diagnose, coach, which is crazy to me. But I've seen other things not get adopted over the years, so it's not a total surprise.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Like, what's behind? It's such an obvious thing. Look, if I was talking to an accounting expert and I said, do you ever check your people's work? And he said, nah, we don't do that. We just assume they're doing all the adding right and everything is good. I'd be like, you're kidding me, right? And for some reason in our discipline, perfectly acceptable and normal for a manager to never observe or inspect how their people are doing their work. So what is up with that? What's behind leaders who aren't willing to invest the time to listen or watch how their people sell?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen all sorts of reasons and rationale over the years. I think fundamentally, to ingrain that culture and the importance of it has to come from the top in a business, has to come from the C-suite to say, this is how we manage and get better results for our team. And if there isn't that level of instruction, it's always just seen as this kind of optional extra. But actually, when you look at the leaders of those teams who, I guess, find the excuses not to do that, it's probably because they never actually had the same did to them when they were a salesperson. So for them, I dare say a lot of them are resistant. The thought of having their own calls listened to is probably something that they're a little bit anxious about. And so they don't want to impose it on their team because they're sat there thinking, well, I wouldn't like this to be done myself. But I guess the bigger quandary is, well, what are you spending your time doing? And I definitely subscribe to the fact that sales managers, sales leaders, are super busy people. I'm one, I've lived it, I get it. Do I have time to be sat there listening to tons of sales calls all day, every day? No. But do I do it? Do I find time to do it? Do I find a way to prioritize it? Yes. And I think we are just, companies are forever still pushing on the plates of sales managers and leaders, all this extra stuff. If you took a step back and say, hey, what is more important? Doing that extra stuff, attending that internal brainstorming session, attending that whatever, that meeting, or is it actually like getting a deep understanding of how your seller is executing in this deal how they are selling, how they are doing discovery, and using that data to improve and get better results from that salesperson. Because isn't that the game that we're in as sales leaders? Isn't our fundamental mantra, hey, your job is getting the very most out of your people because you have to hit a number. So yeah, I think they're probably the things that I feel like I've seen. And the people who really embrace it are the ones that experience the power of it when they were a salesperson having it used on themselves.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great insight. And if how could you advocate or make time for something if you don't really understand what it looks like or it feels like when it's done well? And unfortunately, so many people that are in sales management roles today maybe didn't have that leader or leaders in the past who really invested in them. So it's like, well, why would I do it? Right. So look, I have the advantage or the benefit of looking at sales leadership almost exclusively, mostly through a development lens. So when I look at the role and I see leaders who aren't developing their people, I'm like, well, what are you doing? And to your point, I remember, there's all this other stuff, right? But if you're not doing that, how are you building a team that's going to be any better and more successful for the future? Short answer is you're not, right? So crazy stuff. But tell me a little bit more about the hiring the right people, having kind of a process for finding the right people. What have you learned there that you can share?
Probably connected with my last answer, Matt, is I've learned that the culture I want to build as a sales leader is one of making people better. In fact, the line I always use with people I hire is, hey, at one point, you're going to leave this business. It will happen. Might be after 2 years. It might be after 10 years. My commitment to you is I want you, when you leave the company, whenever that may be, is to say, I am leaving this company as a better salesperson than when I joined. That's what gives me like a buzz, a sense of like fulfillment. And from the feedback I've had with people who I've worked with that maybe have moved on, everybody does say that, like, hey, Rich, remember like when one of the first things that you said to me when I joined, when I was interviewing, you said, when I leave is to be a better salesperson. I believe I'm significantly a better salesperson when I join, which gives me a lot of job satisfaction. But as part of that, I say, well, like, as part of my commitment to you, I just need you to know that if you come into this team, like, you're going to have your calls recorded. I'm going to be listening to your calls. We're going to be listening to your calls as a team in a group setting, because that is how we get better as a team. That's the culture. Now, I appreciate for some people that might not sound like the greatest idea in the world, and they may feel, hey, I've never had that done before, and why should I get it done now? And if that is how you feel, this role probably isn't right for you. And I'm very honest with them about that. And I have at that point came to a conversation in the interview process where we've agreed to put on the brakes and say, maybe this isn't for us, and we part ways. Because for some people, that isn't how they want to operate, and that's fine. And I think as a manager, one of the things I've learned is that there is no point hiding away things. When you're hiring, you have to be very blunt with candidates about, this is the culture we have. This is what we've built and developed over a period of time. This is what we know leads to success. This is what we believe a healthy sales culture, a team culture looks and sounds like. If that isn't for you, then that's fine. But I need to know that now before we all make an expensive mistake. And so, so I think like just connecting with my last answer about the value of inspecting how your salespeople sell, it is about being very upfront and explain that to, like, this is the culture that you're coming into. You either have to like it, embrace it, or you lump it, quite honestly, and it saves a lot of bad hiring mistakes.
There's a connection here between what you were just saying and this phenomenon of managers that maybe don't coach or don't want to coach. I'll make it quick. There's a sort of a contract when you tell someone that you're hiring and that they come aboard that you will be observed, recorded, but you're going to receive some coaching. The contract there is, when we do that, there's going to be value in it for you, Miss Rep or Mr. Rep, which means you have to create that value. You have to bring that value in the conversation, coach. There's some skill required in doing that. I think that's one of the sort of hidden fears that some sales managers have, that, we'll do the recording or I'll go out and I'll do the observation, but I'm not exactly sure if I can bring the value based on, I actually think that's a sort of unspoken, and what sales manager would admit that, right? That they're like, I'm not sure I can bring value here.
Right.
Because if they said that, I think that would be a great moment of honesty, but that would also reveal, hey, that's a huge development opportunity for you.
Right. I think that's spot on, and comes back to this challenge that is prevalent. And it's why people like yourself exist, Matt, is, hey, what if the managers haven't got the skill to do that, and maybe actually putting call recording in their hands is actually dangerous because they don't use it in the right way. They don't use it to coach. They use it as a tool to basically tell the salesperson everything that they did wrong and what they would have done instead in a better way. But you're right. How many sales managers will be proactive? Well, so many sales managers will. That is their version of what coaching is in their head. So unless they change that perception, then you're right. It's you're actually just it's not getting the outcome that you're looking for because you've got managers that don't have the skills to coach.
Yeah, incidentally, you mentioned what we do. The coaching the coaches, observing them as they coach is something we do a lot of, right? Just being able to give them feedback. All right, so you've shared some of the key pieces, key elements in your system, hiring the right people and doing the work to observe and listen to how they're doing the job. Aside from those important pieces of the system, there are other lessons, I presume, you've learned on the job, both from leading yourself and from working with leaders. So what's the most important lesson you've learned so far about leading a sales team?
Do you know what's funny? I made a decision at the start of last year to spin up a Google Doc, and I literally titled this Google Doc Rich's Sales Leadership Lessons. And what I wanted to do was, on a weekly basis, was to add a new lesson to this document. So by the end of the year, I'd have 52 valuable lessons that it's not in my head. It's out, it's on there. I didn't manage to do one every week. I did manage to think I did like two a month. So I ended up at the end of the year having over 20 of these lessons that I'm going to continue adding to, by the way. But I was just looking through that document in preparation for this question. And the hardest thing was picking one of those things, like what's the most important lessons. Maybe if I kind of like pull like a couple of those out, Matt, off this document. One of the first one is salespeople always want more recognition than perhaps you think they do, is something I've learned. One of the things I've really underappreciated is just how much salespeople do crave that recognition. I have been called out before by my own team of not doing that enough. And the danger here is that kind of just praising good performance within the confines of the sales team doesn't always satisfy their needs. And actually, people want to be getting recognized and like shouted about the good work they're doing with maybe other people in the business that are outside the confines of the sales team, being able to share with senior leadership and other teams about the good work that someone's doing. So that's definitely something that I've definitely underappreciated. I've been called out for it before that. Hey, you as a sales leader, the natural thing to do is, hey, I didn't need all this recognition when I was doing the job. Whereas don't underestimate how much people will appreciate those shout outs, that acknowledgement beyond just the financial rewards that they get for doing a good job in sales, and making sure that that recognition is being heard outside of the confines of the sales team too. So that's the first one.
Good point. Yeah. I've needed reminders there too, incidentally. Some people are naturally great at that, but many of us are not for the reason you said, right? I didn't need it, so why do they?
Driving great sales results is hard. Doing it consistently is even harder. There are so many obstacles that can prevent you from becoming the most effective sales leader you can be. Find practical advice you can apply right away by picking up your copy of Matt's book, The Divine Comedy of Sales, at www.divinecomedyofsales.com.
What's the other big lesson?
Yeah, the other big lesson is call reviews are great, but do not forget about practice. So again, as someone who drinks the Kool-Aid of recording sales calls, listening back to those conversations, it is easy to get in a habit of that. That is just where you do your coaching. You do your coaching based on what happened in real sales conversations. But the problem with just doing that is that the danger that they don't truly make the salesperson truly better at what they do. They may reflect on what they did in a call or what they didn't do in a call, or what they could have done differently, but can they actually prove that they would do things differently the next time around? And, practice is something that, again, I know I don't do enough of. I try and do it in the moment at times, like build it into like a pipeline review where we're kind of preparing for a call that's coming up with a prospect. But when practice is done right, you know that you're doing it right because the seller will say, hey, that was actually great. I'd love to do more of that. I think too many people stay away from practicing because it feels fake. It feels not realistic. It doesn't feel like it's natural. And all of the practice that I do with my reps is all based on real stuff. Like I actually listened to a call that took place. Maybe it didn't even involve the seller that I'm coaching. Maybe it was one of their peers. Okay. I'd say, right, this is the situation. I'm going to say pretty much what the prospect said to your peer on their call that you're not aware of. And I want to see how do you handle that conversation. And so the practice becomes based on real stuff, not just, hey, made up fake objections and such like. But yeah, that is, I've just seen sellers, the rate of improvement they get through practice is incredible when you do it right.
Yeah. And consistently. I think practice is the right turn of phrase here. In the past, we might have, role playing or simulation or this or that. Practicing, because that resonates universally, because what important thing would you ever do without practicing it?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't do anything without practicing it. If there was money at stake, right? If your performance was at stake, think about athletics. I mean, it's an obvious parallel. So no, I think that's great. Two really critical lessons. So you've invested, pretty much all of the last, call it decade or so of your career into, selling tools, technology, offerings, but also doing the work of a leader inside a sales team, a sales organization that was selling those things. So you keep gravitating toward these roles. I mentioned head of growth at My Sales Coach, new role. What do you love most about doing this job? What is it that you love most about leading a sales team?
Yeah, I kind of hinted at it before. Is like, I love the satisfaction that comes from when people have finished working with me, that I truly hope that they leave a better salesperson. And with that they may come into the team with 5 years sales experience. They've been taught or maybe not taught how to do sales a certain way. And I say, hey, what if I was to reverse everything that you've ever been taught and teach you a new way that I think's going to help you get better results? And I'm going to coach you and help nurture that in you. And when you see that click, when you just see them do things in discovery meetings with prospects that they've never done before, it's like, it's like light bulb moments going off in their head of like, wow, when I asked this question, the dynamic of the conversation just changed. Or, hey, when I push back on this prospect, which was one of the things that we were working on, listen to how the prospect opened up at that point. And that for me is where I get my job satisfaction, is knowing that these people genuinely are, once I've left or once they've left, I'm leaving them with the skills that will hopefully go on to serve them in the rest of their career. And that's not to say that I'm the best coach in the world or that stuff I teach them is the best stuff in the world. But, if I can see that it's actually making a meaningful difference to their lives and their career and their families' lives, that is a massive piece of job satisfaction for me that goes beyond, them helping me to make my bonus. So
yeah. For those listening, if you've listened to even just a couple, 3, 4 episodes, these interview episodes, you will recognize Rich's answer, because that is the thing that universally that top sales leaders say is the thing that they love most. The satisfaction that they get from seeing other people get better, other people win, other people achieving things that are important to them, setting themselves up for long-term success. So Rich, you're in good company there, because literally every leader that I ask the question has a version of that as part of their answer.
And I think the key thing there is that for some people, those things aren't in their DNA. If they looked inside, they'd be like, well, actually, it is about me and really this. And I think there's maybe some testing questions to ask there about, well, is sales leadership for you if you aren't about the team? Because I think that's the hardest thing for people to accept, is that it's not about you. When the deal comes in, it's not about you to celebrate. It's about your rep to celebrate, and you can recognize the hard work, even if you played a meaningful part in that deal. Yeah. And I think that is what, it doesn't surprise me to hear that others get that same sort of pleasure from the role.
Yeah. Now, if it were all roses, everybody would do this job, because it is awesome to see other people win and to be able to, earn a nice income and all that. But this is, I argue regularly, this is the most difficult job in any organization, hands down. Right? Small company, large company, sales leadership is the pivotal role. It's the most important role. It's also the most challenging, I think. I'm biased, but anyway. So it's a difficult role. What have you found to be the thing that's most challenging about leading a sales organization, leading people? And what have you done about it?
Yeah. For me, it is when things aren't going so well, is still being that beacon of positivity, forward thinking, driving people who may be low on confidence when you are low on confidence yourself, to saying, stick by me, we do the right things consistently, we're on the right path. That's hard. I've been in those situations. You have an absolutely miserable quarter. Feels like the world is caving in. There's no rhyme or reason for it. You're kind of like, there's maybe a little bit of light in the next quarter, but you're kind of sat there like, it's not a guarantee. And you've got a team who finding it harder to kind of pull themselves out of bed to go after it the next day. That is, for me, the hardest thing, when you are the person they will look to say, hey, if the sales leader is down in the dumps and feeling a bit negative, that can kill the entire sales team quite honestly. And so you have to put on that brave face to an extent. But I think that the thing for me is to like, what have I done about it? It always comes back to, do not feel like you have to have all the answers yourself as the sales leader. When things aren't going well, don't feel like you are the one that has to think of the solutions, because actually a lot of the solutions, a lot of the answers exist from within your team. And if you've got the respect of your team, and if you say, right, guys, we're going to put like an hour on the calendar, we're going to all come together as a team, and we're all going to just brainstorm about how can we make an impact on this metric. We're not trying to solve all the problems on this call. We want to solve one metric, and that one metric might be, I don't know, improving our deal execution post demo stage. It could be, how do we club together and try and find a way to increase our team's pipeline coverage by X% in the next 30 days. And it's amazing what happens if you've got the respect of your team. If you say, listen, I'm relying on you guys to help me here and to come together as a team and to think of some great ideas. I've done those sessions before, and it's amazing. Like, if you've got the right people on board your team, ideas come out of the woodwork. Sometimes really obvious things that you're not thinking about, and it brings a real sense of like togetherness by the end of it. It's like, right, we've got 10 ideas here. Let's pick the top 3 best ones and let's go after them as a team. And is a great way of just regaining that energy and that enthusiasm back in the team. So yeah, that's the I guess, to answer that question.
Good. Yeah, that's a great answer. Have lived through it and have worked with other leaders trying to fight through these tough times. And as you said it, being a beacon of positivity in those times, but not swinging too far in the direction of being Pollyanna about it, but admitting, hey, we've got a challenge here. Let's put our heads together to solve it. Now, let me put a challenge to you. And I don't know if you've been in this, but I'm interested in your perspective on this. What if the environment, say you're a VP of sales and your CEO or your COO, whoever you report to, isn't really interested in being positive, isn't really interested in creating this sort of environment where people feel a part of the solution? I mean, how do you balance that when maybe people are feeling it from the top? Or I don't know if you've been in that, but what would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm probably grateful in the sense that I don't feel like I've ever been in that environment before where you can't pull in support from the top. I think that if I was in that situation, I think you have to look at it and say, well, first of all, as a sales leader, that your business is investing in you. Like, when times get tough, like, you should get support from people above you. If they're not giving you that, and that you're actually just becoming this, hey, you need to solve this or else. Again, I'd question if that is the right culture for you to be and operate, because ultimately everybody in a business, from the CEO, CRO, VP of sales, everybody is in it together. And again, I'm very grateful that in my career, I've always worked with supportive leaders that, like, hey, when it comes down to sales, it's not just on the sales leadership who have the answers. Everything that we do as a business and other teams, marketing, product, CS, all these things can tie into creating a difference in the sales process. But if you're still in that situation where you haven't got that support and it is all a bit on you, is again, I lean on your sellers, your reps, like, and bring them closer to you and say, listen, like, this is on us to find out answers and solutions. And you'll be surprised at how much they will rally around you if you command their support. And by the way, the way that you command their support is doing all the things that we've talked about in this podcast so far, which is investing in them, making them better salespeople. That's how you're going to command their respect. That's when they're going to rally around you when the chips are down. And if you're not doing those things, then don't expect a sales team to run to your support you when the times are tough.
All right, Rich, we've only got another minute or two here. I'm going to ask you one last question in the hopes that I'm going to grab another nugget out of your brain based on your experiences. What else? What else do we need to know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I reflected back on my my lessons of sales leadership to see, is there another thing that I think would be valuable to talk about. And I kind of like have written about this on LinkedIn in recent weeks around coaching, and my thing around, hey, managers will always find, hey, I don't have time to coach, or this is getting in the way of coaching. And I think one of the challenges with that is that coaching is inherently seen as like an event. Hey, I need to put in an hour to coach my sales rep today. Stop thinking that coaching has to be an event. Think of it as a series of moments. And I kind of use the example of, you're doing a pipeline review with a seller, which most sales managers will find the time to do, is to, hey, let's look at your deals. Let's see what your pipeline health is and what's going to come in this month. And try and identify in that conversation whether a moment's to coach. And an example of that could be, Rich, yeah, so I've got this deal. I'm actually got a call scheduled for 11 on Thursday where we're going to be reviewing my proposal that I sent to them. We're going to be talking about the terms of the structure of the deal. Use that opportunity as a coaching moment. Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Shall we just quickly play out some scenarios of what the prospect could say, some curveballs that they might come out with on Thursday? If they say this, what would be your strategy to combat that? Or if they ask for this, what are you going to ask for in return? And again, you're seeing that as a coaching moment. It could be a 3-minute coaching moment that's in the midst of an activity that you're doing religiously each week anyway. And it's amazing how many, if you find those coaching moments consistently through a week, your sellers will feel that they're being developed in a way that they haven't done before. And it's not, again, the idea is that you do have to put a big event on the calendar and, hey, this is going to take 2 hours of my time. Think of coaching as a series of moments rather than just an event.
I love it. And that's really coaching and development in its best form, right? It's ongoing. It's not this sort of discrete. It's almost like it's an exception to the rule, right? We're going to have a coaching conversation, which is different from the other 39 hours of the week. It's no, it's ongoing. So I like how you put it. It's a series of moments. I've told people it's like we're listening for opportunities to help people draw different conclusions, and be motivated to try things. We've got to be tuned in all the time. It can't be these sort of fixed moments. Rich, in a moment, I'm going to try to summarize some of the wisdom here that you've shared and give the listeners an opportunity to reflect and think about how could they apply some of the lessons that you've learned and the things you've shared with us over the last 30 or so minutes. Before I go there, I want to say thank you for sharing the time and all of your insight. This was wonderful. I so appreciate you joining. Thank you so much.
Loved it. Thanks, Matt. Hope it was valuable for the listeners.
Absolutely. I knew Rich Smith was going to be a great guest on the podcast, not only because he's got a lot to say on the topic of coaching and sales leadership, but because the one thing we have in common, we both have a relatively narrow focus. And he's focused on coaching and technology and tools and services that support or augment coaching. I'm focused on sales management, coaching and development, and on leadership. And when you keep your focus relatively tight and narrow on a subject, it means you're better able to go deep. So maybe one of the first lessons here for everyone listening is, or maybe it's a question, am I thinking enough about my team's development to be able to go deeply into it and really think about what are the challenges? What am I doing to overcome them? Or do I just sort of go about my job blithely and, based on the pace of things, not really allow myself to think all that deeply about my people's development or my own development as a leader? Something to think about. Anyway, coming back to Richard's discussion, or the discussion I had with Rich, there are a few things that he said. I won't repeat things that he said that we've heard from other leaders other than, hey, let's make note. What does he love most about the job? Same thing. A lot of great leaders love most about the job. When talking about his system, though, this is going to be something we hear not only from Rich today, but one of my next guests. They said virtually the same thing, that a key part of his system, hiring the right people and having a process for finding the right people. Along the way, don't hide your culture from the people that you are trying to hire. Let them know in the clearest possible sense, what will it be like to work here? What's the environment like? What can you expect from us? So that we can then lay certain expectations on you. He said something about what he loves about being a leader of salespeople. He wants to make sure that people, when they leave for whatever reason, years down the line after they're hired, he wants them to be able to say, honestly, I'm leaving this company better than I was when I joined. So if you think about that from a development perspective, if that's the end goal, right? Let's work backwards. If the goal is for the people who leave us, maybe they've been promoted, maybe they leave for a bigger job, more opportunity, it happens. But if they leave us and they say, I am leaving this company better than I was when I joined, I'd say that's success from a development perspective. So how do we get there? And Rich described, this is when we were talking about, lessons that he's learned. We talked a little bit about development and what is the journey? What are some key parts of the journey that get us to that point where people can look back on their experience working for us and they say, I am definitely better than when I got here. Certainly starts with hiring the right people, but building on that is a commitment to coaching. Along the way, another key lesson that Rich said he learned was that we have to stop thinking of coaching as an event. Instead, he said, it's a series of moments, which is exactly how I think about it, right? This is not a one-time, a discrete thing that we're going to do every once in a while because the calendar tells us to. But coaching and development is an ongoing effort where the end game is that the people that we hire and develop on our teams can look back on that experience to say, I am definitely better having worked for Rich or having worked for Matt or having worked for fill in the blank. So he said something else that resonated with me. One other key lesson learned. He said, sellers always want more recognition than you can give. For some of us, that's a real struggle, right? I really have to make note, put things on my calendar like every other Friday, make a point of recognizing the team's effort. He said, give recognition beyond the confines of the sales team. In other words, don't just hold your praise for team meetings. Make sure people outside of the team know just what people have done to achieve the outcomes, the results, the success that they have. Help other people to understand what the effort really looks like. That resonated with me. He said one other thing about what's really challenging about the role. Again, this one hit me hard. He said, you have to be a beacon of positivity in tough times. And as I reflect on my own experience and the teams that I've led, that's been a struggle for me. I've been in situations that were tough, and I'm a kind of a dreadfully honest person and lay things out for people and try not to sugarcoat. But I think that can be a mistake. You can go too far being open and honest with your teams. Sometimes all people really need is for somebody to pick the team up and be positive, a coach, a quarterback, a team leader, a team captain. And so that was one of the things that Rich said he's learned. So I'm going to take that one. I work with teams all the time, and I think I have to work on being a stronger beacon of positivity. Those who know me are probably chuckling as I say that, but it's true. So again, so much to learn from Rich. The depth of his understanding of the topics of coaching and sales management are unrivaled. Great guy to follow. So please do on LinkedIn. He posts some great content. Buy his book. So with that, I want to thank you for joining. In our next episode, we're going to hear from someone who's had massive success in multiple roles as a chief revenue officer, a head of sales in the tech industry. And I'm very much looking forward to having you join for that conversation. In the meantime, I'm Matt McDarby, host and author of The Divine Comedy of Sales. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye for now.